They asked one question, and the answer changed everything. When Senator Coons looked across the hearing room and asked, "Who does the FBI director work for?" The silence that followed wasn't confusion, it was revelation. What came next wasn't a straightforward explanation of law or duty, but a carefully worded descent into the kind of answer that makes a democracy hold its breath. The nominee at that table didn't just dodge. He redefined. And in that moment, you could feel something shifting, something deeper than politics, something that would decide whether law enforcement serves justice or power. He spoke smoothly, listing the chain of command: Deputy Attorney General, White House. A bureaucratic recital that sounded harmless, until you realized what it meant.
Into President Trump.
Senator, thank you. One quick correction for the record. There's 280 NV investigations. I gave the incorrect number to Senator Hawley. Thank you.
Understood.
As far as a lot of your statement, I disagree with it, and I'm happy to address it. But the only way, generally speaking, an individual is terminated at the FBI is if they have violated their oath of office, violated the law, or failed to uphold the standards that we need them to have at the FBI.
So those who say that they've been fired because of working on investigations into President Trump are lying or misrepresenting?
Well, those matters are alleged in litigation, which is ongoing, so I can't comment on those specifically.
Could you comment on why you fired former acting FBI Director Driscoll?
I can't because it's ongoing litigation.
Could you say now definitively under oath that the rank and file agents who were assigned to work January 6 cases will not be terminated because that's what they were assigned to do?
I've said it before and I've said it again. Your case assignment, as I was given case assignments when I was a young prosecutor, does not dictate your career or your termination.
Thank you. Then let me go to the appropriations question. In May, you testified before the subcommittee on which I serve, defending the president's request that we slash the FBI's budget by about $500 million. The day before, you testified the opposite in front of the House. Where are we in terms of the budget request? Senator Graham earlier said if you're requesting more funding for more agents, let us know. We're nearing the end of the fiscal year. In front of the committee on which I serve here in the Senate, your request was for a reduction of hundreds of millions of dollars. Where are we?
Where we are in the budget cycle is we at the FBI are in support of the president's budget, and we are in support of eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. We've already identified tens of millions of dollars of duplicative contracts that the FBI was spending on software and private sector engagements. We've also identified duplicative workloads. So we are transitioning those folks out of doing the same thing twice over and into the field. And that's my focus right now. And the move of the FBI headquarters is also going to save the FBI $3.5 billion in the American taxpayers. So we're focused on eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. And as I told Senator Graham, if we're, I'll go back and talk to my team, and if we need more, we'll let you know.
Are you planning any additional reductions in force, Director?
No.
How many vacancies are you currently trying to fill within the agency?
In terms of the 1811 ranks, there's a few hundred open vacancies that we have funded. And so we're filling all of those with our hybrid 1811 program and our new recruitment program, and I think a lesser amount of IAs and SOS.
So if hundreds of agents have retired or taken the fork in the road offer, and you have vacancies, but you're requesting $500 million less, how does having fewer FBI agents help you tackle violent crime and address our national security issues?
Just to put it in perspective, Senator, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If we had this $500 million, we've done the math. It would take us 14 years to onboard every vacancy that's on the books currently at the FBI because we can't hire these folks and train them overnight. It's a years-long process. So we are currently focused on recruiting the best and filling the positions to the best of our needs. And we, even if we had this extra money, wouldn't be able to hire them overnight. We're looking for where the need is greatest, where in the country we need to send them, and how we can change the training requirements, which is why I'm thrilled to have police officers. They might not have a college degree, but they got the street smarts and the cop smarts to become FBI agents, and that's what we want.
Let me turn to Section 702.
Yes,
when you testified in front of the CJS subcommittee, we talked about this issue. You told me you were in favor of reauthorizing FISA Section 702 when it expires next year,
right,
so long as the reforms implemented last year, reforms like better training for agents and real consequences for inappropriate searches of Americans' communications, were maintained. You also said that you had some ideas about how to make Section 702 better going forward. Can you give me an update on the FBI's implementation of these reforms and the direction you think it should go?
Absolutely. I think you're referring to the query process, and if you're not, let me know. But any instance of abuse or mistakes that were made in the query process have now been changed. It used to be you can make multiple mistakes and continue to access the query database system. I've changed that. If you make a mistake, you're immediately sidelined, a review is conducted, and if it was an actual mistake, i.e., there should have been S on the end of that name and there wasn't, then we put you back in. But we have to review those matters. So that's happening. And if there was an intentional mistake, you have no more access to the 702 query system and its database. So we've also done an audit of the entire 702 system and the query databases. And now we are nearly 100% of the audit. And I think we found one or two, I'll have to get back to you, quote unquote mistakes within that system, which are currently being reviewed.
Thank you. You had told me in May that you'd send me updated statistics about the Section 702 searches of Americans' data. I haven't received it. When will I get that?
I'll work with my team to get that to you, Senator.
And frankly, in May, when you were testifying that you were implementing these reforms, you were also closing down the Office of Internal Auditing at the FBI. Now, that was the office created in the first Trump administration to improve the Bureau's compliance with Section 702. How is that working out? How can you continue to advocate for robust civil liberty protections but shut down the office that was created to enforce those safeguards? Help me understand this.
Absolutely, Senator. This is a great example of sort of duplicative work. Both, there was two divisions in the FBI working on this, and all we did was the inspection division, which is the leader in this query system and this audit system, has now been given the single source mandate to conduct these. So the OIA, its elimination is just taking folks who were working there and were experts in it and folded in under the inspection division, and then taking other folks that we didn't need because we had enough manpower and pushing them elsewhere in the FBI.
I'm concerned about the rise in threats against members of our judiciary. What are you doing with the U.S. Marshal Service to help protect our federal judges and with state and local judicial systems to help provide some of the expertise of the FBI in protecting them as well?
I share your concern, Senator. We have 35 open investigations, 17 against federal judges, and the remainder against state court judges and threats that they have received. And as you know, federally, there's a specific statute which prohibits that. So we are working up those cases and referring them to prosecution where we can meet the threshold for evidence.
In your written testimony, you referenced how counter-UAS legislation expires and we need to resolve the conflict in jurisdiction and authority. I agree, this is an urgent concern. I have heard from state and local law enforcement about it, from the folks responsible for major events, whether it's sports or concerts or public events. Given the tragic increase in political violence, I'm very concerned about the misuse of drones and the potential of there being a catastrophic event. What could we do to address this challenge?
Well, obviously, reauthorizing the capabilities that we have under the counter-UAS program. But just to highlight what the FBI is specifically doing, we've been given the mandate to work with DHS to secure not just the Club World Cup that we had, by the way, which occurred in 32 matches across the country without any significant incident, which we're proud of, and we're taking that model for the next World Cup and also the Olympics. But the reason I bring that up is because we pushed out our counter-UAS programs to address the security needs, and that's where our focus is on events like that.
Mr. Director, thank you for your testimony. I look forward to working on actually solving criminal problems and reducing the extent to which what we're going back and forth about is more political and partisan point scoring and more actually solving crimes for the American people.
Yes, sir.
Senator Kennedy.
If the line ends at the White House, where does independence begin? Coons didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. The damage was already done. What had been a question about structure suddenly became a question about loyalty. Because when someone maps the path of power upward instead of outward, to the people, to the Constitution, you learn what they really believe in. But the hearing was only beginning. The next question turned from structure to obedience. Would you open an investigation into a political rival if ordered to do so? It was the kind of test that every public servant knows defines them, not by what they say, but by what they refuse to say. And this nominee, who promised neutrality, who spoke of duty, didn't say the one word that mattered. No. Instead, he wrapped his answer in the language of procedure, talking about factual bases and articulable predicates. It was legal poetry designed to sound like principle. But to anyone listening closely, it was something else entirely, a refusal to draw a line. Because real independence isn't about how you follow the law when it's easy. It's about what you do when power tells you to break it. Every director before him, from Hoover to Ray, knew that sooner or later, that test comes. And every one of them, when asked if they'd resign rather than obey an illegal order, had the same answer: yes. They'd walk away before they let the Bureau become a weapon. But not this time. When Coons asked whether he'd resign if told to carry out something unconstitutional, the response was calm, almost rehearsed. "I will always obey the law," he said. No hesitation, no conviction, just the kind of polished answer that sounds safe, until you realize it says nothing at all, because under a system built on loyalty, the law itself can be redefined. Obeying it doesn't mean upholding justice. It means serving whoever gets to decide what the law means that day. That's how systems don't just collapse. They shift, quietly, from integrity to obedience. And that quiet is what makes it so dangerous. Then came the moment that stripped away the pretense entirely. Coons brought up something most viewers had forgotten: the nominee's own past statements. Not years old, not rumors, public comments. Posts calling for the prosecution of the previous FBI director. Podcasts accusing his own agency of betrayal. And now, here he was, sitting before the Senate, asking to take over that very agency. Imagine replacing the head of an organization with the person who once demanded that head be charged with a crime. That's not reform. That's revenge dressed up as leadership. He didn't deny those words. He deflected, said the Bureau would be busy preventing overdoses, assaults, and homicides. Important words, true words, but also a classic diversion. Focus the public on fear, not accountability. Promise safety, not independence. Because once you control what people are afraid of, you control what they'll accept. And that's the quiet genius of what's happening now. It's not chaos anymore. It's strategy. It's the evolution of control from shouting to silence. In the past, leaders who wanted power over justice attacked institutions directly, firing, threatening, mocking. But this new approach is smoother. It speaks the language of professionalism. It uses the tools of legality to achieve the same ends as raw defiance. It doesn't break the rules, it rewrites them. And it does it so carefully that by the time you notice, the meaning of independence has already changed. This isn't speculation, it's pattern. The system learned from its mistakes. Outright conflict creates resistance. Quiet compliance creates acceptance. That's why this confirmation matters so much. It's not about one person. It's about institutional DNA. Once you teach an organization that lawful can mean loyal, you don't have to command it anymore. It self-censors. It anticipates what power wants and delivers it before anyone asks. And here's the part that chills the most. It doesn't look like a takeover. There won't be televised purges, mass firings, or midnight raids. It'll look normal. Meetings, reports, hearings, briefings. All the appearances of legality, none of the substance. The transformation won't come through drama. It'll come through paperwork. Through polite answers like, "We're following procedure." Through smiling officials who use words like oversight, continuity, and lawful direction to describe decisions that bend the law until it breaks. When that happens, the danger isn't that people will notice, it's that they won't. It will look boring, predictable, professional. And that's exactly how institutions are captured in plain sight. Not through fire, but through formality. Coons understood that. His tone throughout the hearing wasn't angry. It was surgical. He wasn't trying to humiliate the nominee. He was documenting something for the record, the moment when independence stopped being a principle and started being optional. The entire exchange, from that first question about chain of command to the final non-answer about resignation, was a snapshot of a country at a crossroads. Because what you're hearing in those answers isn't confusion, it's preparation. It's what obedience sounds like before it becomes policy. And make no mistake, that shift affects everything. When the head of an agency like the FBI answers to loyalty instead of law, every investigation, every prosecution, every piece of evidence becomes negotiable. It's no longer about right or wrong. It's about alignment. Who you are, who you serve, whether your case fits the narrative or contradicts it. That's how justice fades, not in explosions, but in paperwork stamped approved. What makes it more dangerous is that it feels so rational. He wasn't yelling, wasn't threatening. He was calm, polite, articulate. That's what gives this moment its power. Because when control comes wrapped in reason, it doesn't look like control. It looks like leadership. And people stop questioning it. Oh, let's look again at that phrase. I will always obey the law. It sounds noble. It sounds patriotic. But ask yourself, whose version of the law? Under whose interpretation? Because in the wrong hands, those words can justify anything. History shows us that authoritarianism rarely announces itself. It hides behind oaths, behind legality, behind the promise that it's all for the nation's good. The danger isn't the person who says, I'll break the law. It's the one who says, I'll follow it, while quietly rewriting what the law means. And that's exactly what's unfolding. The Bureau's mission hasn't been rewritten on paper, but it's being reinterpreted in practice. Lawful investigations become political ones. National security threats become political opponents. Every system built on trust starts to question itself from within. Agents hesitate. Whistleblowers go silent. Fear replaces principle. And it all happens so gradually that by the time the public realizes, the structure still looks intact, but the soul is gone. That's how democracies end. Not with a coup, but with compliance. With hearings like this one where the answers sound responsible, even as they hollow out meaning. When asked about who he serves, he doesn't say the Constitution. He says the chain of command. That's the quiet shift that turns public servants into loyal subjects. And the truth is, by the time people notice, it's too late. But there's still one defense left, and it doesn't come from inside government. It comes from attention, from the simple act of not looking away. That's why these hearings matter, even when they feel procedural or dull. They're the record of what freedom looks like while it's being redefined. Every word, every evasion, every careful phrase tells you more than any headline ever could. Because when power starts speaking softly, that's when you need to listen the closest. What happens now? What does it mean for a country when the most powerful law enforcement agency on earth is led by someone who treats independence as optional? It means that the people, the watchers, the citizens, the voices, become the last line of defense. It means questioning, documenting, talking. It means refusing to let silence become normal, because independence in law enforcement isn't a luxury. It's the foundation of the rule of law itself. Once it cracks, everything above it, justice, accountability, freedom, starts to crumble. And when that crumble begins, it doesn't announce itself with sirens. It sounds like this: measured answers, polite tones, procedural language. That's the sound of democracy quietly eroding from within. That if you've made it this far, remember, silence helps power more than loyalty ever could. So don't just watch, question. Don't just scroll, share. Keep this conversation alive. Because the moment people stop paying attention, that's the moment the meaning of justice changes forever. Stay informed. Stay vocal. And if you want to keep seeing stories that pull back the curtain on how power really works, hit subscribe, tap like, and turn on notifications. Because awareness is the only safeguard left, and the only thing that keeps freedom from fading into silence.